I now give the floor to Mr. Khaled Kiari.
Mr. President, since the Secretariat's last briefing on Sudan in October, the conflict has again intensified, confirming fears that the dry season will bring increased fighting and renewed attacks on civilians. Each passing day brings staggering levels of violence and destruction. Civilians are enduring immense and unimaginable suffering with no end in sight. In recent weeks, the conflict has centered in the Kordofan region, where the Rapid Support Forces have made significant territorial gains. On 1 December, the Rapid Support Forces captured Babanouza in West Kordofan, followed on 8 December by their capture of Heglig in South Kordofan, an oil field and critical processing station for South Sudanese crude oil pumped to Port Sudan for exportation. Kadugli and Diling, both in South Kordofan, are now under tightening siege conditions. Reports indicate that Sudanese armed forces personnel withdrew from Babanouza and Heglig into South Sudan, and that South Sudanese forces moved into Sudan to protect the Heglig oil infrastructure. Beyond Heglig, movements of armed groups across Sudan and South Sudan's border have been reported in both directions, with potentially destabilizing effects for both countries. These developments reflect the increasingly complex nature of the conflict and its expanding regional dimensions. If unaddressed, Sudan's neighbors could become embroiled in a regional conflict in and around Sudan. Mr. President, for months, the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights has warned of the dangers of the escalation of hostilities in the Kordofan region and called for urgent action to prevent the repetition of atrocities documented in North Darfur and El Fasher in particular. A particularly alarming feature of the conflict is the growing use of indiscriminate drone strikes by both parties, which are causing significant civilian deaths. On 4 December, drone strikes in Kalogi, South Kordofan, hit a kindergarten and then the hospital where victims of the initial attacks had been taken for treatment. More than 100 people were killed in this despicable attack, including 63 children. On 13 December, drone attacks targeted the UN logistics base at the Joint Border Verification and Monitoring Mechanism headquarters in Kadugli, South Kordofan. 6 members of the Bangladeshi peacekeeping contingent serving with the United Nations Interim Security Force for ABA, UNISFA, were killed and 9 others injured. UNISFA has launched an investigation and is working to preserve evidence under challenging circumstances that would help identify those responsible. Due to prevailing insecurity, all UNISFA personnel are being evacuated from Kadugli until further notice. As the Secretary General has stressed, attacks targeting United Nations peacekeepers may constitute war crimes under international law and called for accountability. The safety and security of our peacekeepers is non-negotiable. In addition to the rise in civilian death toll, there are concerns about increasing cases of detention of civilians accused by one party of, quote, collaboration, end quote, with the opposing side. In November, OHCHR documented that 93 civilians were arrested and detained in the Kordofan region for reasons of collaboration. Mr. President, the continued supply of weapons, increasingly sophisticated and deadly, remains a key driver of the conflict. Sudan is saturated with arms. Calls to end these flows have gone unheeded, and there has been no accountability. Meanwhile, the parties remain unwilling to compromise or de-escalate. While they were able to stop fighting to preserve oil revenues, they have so far failed to do the same to protect their population. The backers of both sides must use their influence to help stop the slaughter, not to cause further devastation. Mr. President, preventing a further deterioration of the situation and preserving the unity and territorial integrity of Sudan requires swift and coordinated action. The Secretary General's personal envoy of Sudan, Ramtan Lamamra, is in contact with both warring parties to encourage them to engage in discussions on concrete and implementable measures to de-escalate violence and advance the protection of civilians in Sudan. Personnel Envoy Lamamra is engaging closely with members of the Quad. Consistent coordination of peace efforts is essential to increase our collective impact. Equally important is the deepening collaboration among the quintet of multilateral organizations, the African Union, European Union, IGAD, the League of Arab States, and the United Nations. Together, we are currently focused on supporting an African Union-led inter-Sudanese dialogue that can pave the way for a credible, inclusive, and civilian-led transition. To support these efforts, the Office of Personnel Envoy Lamamra is developing a consensus document aimed to synthesize the visions put forward by Sudanese political actors and prominent individuals. The goal of this exercise is to identify convergences in views that can assist Sudanese stakeholders in shaping a credible political horizon. To foster complementarity and coordination of peace efforts, preparations are underway for the 5th consultative meeting on enhancing coordination of peace initiatives. The next meeting is expected to be held in Cairo, Egypt in early 2026. Mr. President, as mediation efforts continue, the strong support of this Council is needed. With the conflict nearing the tragic milestone of 1,000 days, the Secretary General has renewed his call on the parties to agree on an immediate cessation of hostilities and to re-engage in talks toward a lasting ceasefire and an inclusive and Sudanese-owned political process. We urge the Council to send a clear, united message. Those who enable this war will be held accountable. We also look to the Council to use all the tools at its disposal to demand peace, protect civilians, and ensure accountability for violations of international law. The United Nations is fully committed to working with all international actors to end the violence and to support an inclusive path towards peace and security for the sake of people of Sudan and regional stability. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Mr. Chiari for his briefing. I now give the floor to Ms. Eden Vosorno.
Thank you, Mr. President. As this catastrophic war nears the 1,000-day mark, its devastating toll on civilians continues to expand and intensify. The brutality of this conflict appears to have no bounds. The Kordofan states have emerged as a new epicenter, as you've heard, of violence and suffering, with attacks continuing, causing